The story begins with a sound clear, calm, and unmistakably human. It wasn't the voice of a celebrity or a political leader, but of a teacher from Davao City, Philippines. Her name was Maria Fernandez, and she never imagined her voice would one day echo across the world, shaping how millions would learn to speak, and even think in English. Maria's voice wasn't the kind that demanded attention. It was the kind that gently held it, wrapping each word in warmth and sincerity. Those who heard her speak said it felt like sunlight in the middle of a storm, bright, grounding, and full of quiet power. In classrooms filled with restless students and flickering fluorescent lights, her words cut through the noise like music, steady and unshaken. Years later, her story would inspire a documentary that would travel beyond the Philippines, beyond Asia, and find its way into American living rooms, newsrooms, and universities. But before the world came calling, there was just Maria standing at the front of a crowded classroom, holding a piece of chalk in one hand and a heart full of purpose in the other. She believed that language was more than grammar or pronunciation. To her, it was connection. Every sentence was a bridge between hearts, every accent a reminder of where someone came from. And she taught that way not with drills or memorization, but with empathy. Your voice matters, she would tell her students. Don't try to sound perfect. Try to sound sincere. Among her many students, one name would come to define her legacy: Jonathan Reeves, an American journalist sent to the Philippines to investigate the growing popularity of Filipino English and call centers and online education. Jonathan had arrived with skepticism and a notepad full of assumptions. He had been trained to believe that American English was the standard, the gold coin of global communication. But what he discovered would change that belief forever. Their paths crossed one humid afternoon at a teachers' conference in Manila. Maria had been invited to speak on the role of empathy in language learning. Jonathan had come merely to observe, expecting a lecture filled with linguistic jargon and predictable slides. Instead, he found himself sitting upright, transfixed, as Maria began to speak. Her voice was calm but magnetic. She spoke not from authority, but from authenticity. When we speak English, she said, we carry our history with us. We carry our islands, our laughter, our struggles. That is not something to hide, it is something to share. Jonathan scribbled her words into his notebook, then paused, realizing something: he wasn't just reporting anymore. He was listening. After the talk, he introduced himself. I've never heard someone talk about language the way you do, he said. Maria smiled, that quiet, knowing kind of smile that always seemed to hide a dozen unspoken thoughts. Maybe because people forget, she replied, that language was never about sounding like someone else. It was about being heard. That was the moment it began, not a romance in the traditional sense, but a meeting of minds, a connection built on shared fascination and mutual respect. Over coffee under the dim lights of a Manila cafe, they talked for hours. Maria told him about her childhood in Davao, how her mother sang lullabies in both Tagalog and English, and how her father used to say, your voice can feed people if you use it right. Jonathan shared his own story of chasing headlines and deadlines, always searching for the next big story, never realizing the biggest one might be about something as simple as speech. When Jonathan returned to his hotel that night, he played back the recording of Maria's talk. There was something in her tone and enforced clarity, a rhythm that carried both humility and authority. It wasn't like any accent he'd heard before. The next morning, he called his editor in New York. I think, he said, I've found a story worth staying for. So he stayed. Maria introduced him to her students, to local broadcasters, and to the heart of what made Filipino English so powerful. Together they visited call centers in Makati, where agents spoke to American customers as naturally as neighbors chatting across a fence. Jonathan watched in awe as employees seamlessly switched from English to Tagalog to Bisaya and back again, all while maintaining the same warmth. What's their secret? He asked Maria one evening. She smiled. Kindness. You can't fake it. People feel it through your words. That's why Filipinos connect. We don't just talk, we listen first. That answer struck him. In all his years covering communication, he had never considered listening as the foundation of mastery. Over time, Jonathan became her shadow, documenting lessons, recording interviews, and observing the small miracles that unfolded in her classroom daily. He saw timid students find their confidence. He watched how Maria corrected errors not with scolding, but with stories. When a student mispronounced a word, she would say, "You didn't make a mistake, you just showed me where your heart lives." As weeks turned into months, Jonathan began sending footage back to his network. The response from his editors was immediate and unexpected. "There's something special here," one producer wrote. "People feel her voice." It wasn't long before a short feature aired on American television titled "The Voice of Clarity: How the Philippines is Teaching the World to Speak English." The segment went viral overnight. Viewers praised not only Maria's teaching but her gentle command of English. Her accent, once dismissed by some as foreign, was now being called the sound of global English, but Maria didn't care for fame. When Jonathan told her about the segment's success, she simply laughed. "If it makes people listen more kindly," she said, "then that's good enough for me." Months later, Jonathan invited her to New York for a global education summit. Maria hesitated. "I've never left the Philippines," she confessed. "What if I sound out of place there?" "You won't," Jonathan assured her. "They need to hear you." When she finally stood on the stage at the summit, facing hundreds of educators, journalists, and linguists from around the world, she took a deep breath and began, "I come from a small island, where voices are often small, too. But I've learned that when your words carry kindness, they travel farther than you think." The hall fell silent. By the time she finished, the audience rose in applause. Some were crying. The next morning, her speech was trending across social media under the hashtag the Filipino Voice. What began as a humble teacher's philosophy had become a global movement. And at the center of it all was Maria Fernandez, a woman who believed that the truest form of language wasn't just about clarity of sound, but clarity of heart. Yet, behind the growing fame, something deeper was stirring. Maria's health began to falter. The long nights of teaching and travel took their toll, though she hid it behind her ever-present smile. Jonathan noticed the change first: the faint tremor in her hands, the way her voice occasionally caught mid-sentence. When he asked, she brushed it off. "I'm just tired," she said. "There's still so much work to do." He didn't press her. He knew she'd never stop, not when her mission was just beginning. After the New York summit, Maria's life changed faster than she could have imagined. Invitations poured in from London, from Singapore, from universities that wanted to hear her speak about the Filipino rhythm of English. For a woman who had spent most of her life in a classroom by the sea, it was overwhelming. Jonathan stayed by her side, filming everything, quietly protecting her from the noise of sudden fame. But Maria never let the attention distract her from her purpose. She reminded Jonathan that a microphone is not a throne, it's a bridge. Every time she stood before a camera, she thought of her students back home. The ones who still practiced pronunciation under mango trees and whispered new words into the evening breeze. The documentary they were making grew into something neither of them had expected. What started as a short feature became a full-length project titled The Accent of Empathy. It wasn't just about language anymore, it was about the spirit behind it. Jonathan traveled across the islands with Maria, capturing stories of call center workers, radio hosts, and farmers who used English to reach the world. In Cebu, they met a young woman named Leela who taught herself English by watching YouTube videos and later became an online tutor for students in Canada. In Iloilo, they spoke with fishermen who recorded safety training videos for shipping companies abroad. Everywhere they went, Maria listened intently, her eyes shining with pride. "You see," she would say to Jonathan, "we are not echoing the West, we are harmonizing with it." When the first rough cut of the documentary was shown at a film festival in Singapore, the audience gave a standing ovation. Critics called it a quiet revolution in sound. News outlets ran headlines like, "The Philippines, the country that teaches the world to talk." Jonathan was ecstatic. But Maria, though grateful, remained grounded. "The story isn't about me," she told him. It's about how every Filipino carries a piece of warmth in their speech. You can't teach that from a textbook. Soon, large American media networks began to notice. Voice coaching companies started reaching out, wanting to analyze what made Filipino English so distinct. AI developers began using Filipino speech samples to train digital assistants for clarity and friendliness. The Filipino tone became the industry's secret recipe for what they call trust-based communication. One afternoon in Los Angeles, Jonathan showed Maria an article on his phone. The next voice of America may have a Filipino accent. She laughed softly. "Imagine that," she said. "We used to practice American accents to sound more professional. Now America wants to sound like us." He looked at her, then not as a subject, but as a partner. "You changed the conversation," he said. Maria shook her head. "We changed it together." Their relationship deepened. Between interviews and travel, they found quiet moments, breakfasts in small diners, evening walks after long filming days, endless talks about language and life. Jonathan admired her calm resilience. Maria admired his relentless curiosity. They were, in every way, mirrors of one another, two storytellers trying to teach the world how to listen. But as their documentary neared completion, Maria's health grew worse. During one shoot in Manila, she fainted mid-interview. The crew rushed to her side, and Jonathan's heart froze. When she awoke in the hospital, she downplayed it with a smile. "It's just exhaustion," she insisted. "Don't stop the work." Jonathan wanted to protest, but he knew she would never forgive him if he did. So he continued the project, taking on more of the workload while she recovered. Still, she insisted on recording voiceovers for the documentary, her voice thinner now but somehow even more beautiful. "My accent might fade," she joked weakly, "but the message won't." When the Accent of Empathy premiered globally, it was an instant phenomenon. Millions streamed it online. Schools across the world began discussing the ethics of accent bias. Linguistic forums debated whether Filipino English should be recognized as its own standard. For the first time, children from the Philippines saw themselves reflected on screen as teachers, not imitators of the English language. Maria sat in her living room watching the online comments flood in. Many were from people who had once felt ashamed of their accent. "I used to hide my voice on calls. After watching this, I spoke proudly for the first time. This film made me realize kindness is fluency." Maria cried reading them. She turned to Jonathan and said softly, "If even one person believes their voice matters because of this, then we've succeeded." Jonathan nodded, but inside fear grew. He could see how weak she was becoming. One night, after another long day of press interviews, she collapsed again. This time, the doctors warned her to rest completely. "If you keep pushing, your heart might not recover," they said. Jonathan sat beside her hospital bed, guilt tightening his chest. "I should have made you stop," he said. Maria smiled faintly. "You can't stop love, Jonathan. Teaching is love. It's how I breathe." He held her hand. "Then let me help you breathe easier." And so he made a promise to carry her voice forward, no matter what happened. Over the next few months, as Maria recovered at home, Jonathan began editing the documentary's extended version. He included unseen clips of her classroom, her laughter with students, her long pauses before answering questions, the small moments that revealed her humanity. He also began writing a book titled The Teacher Who Changed the World Without Shouting. Maria contributed from her bed, sending him notes and voice memos. "Add this," she'd say, recording with the soft rasp of her healing lungs. "Language isn't owned by any nation, it's borrowed by the heart." When Jonathan finished editing, he showed her the final scene, a montage of students speaking English in different Filipino accents, saying, "I am not wrong. I am heard." Maria smiled through tears. "It's perfect," she whispered. "You heard me." That night, she asked him for a favor. "When I'm gone," she said gently, "promise you'll keep teaching people to listen." He swallowed hard, unable to speak. Finally, he nodded. "I promise." She closed her eyes, content. "Then everything will be all right." Months later, while Jonathan was back in New York promoting the documentary, he received a call that shattered him. Maria had suffered a heart attack and was in critical condition. He flew back to Davao immediately, his mind replaying every word she'd ever said. By the time he reached the hospital, she was unconscious. Her mother handed him Maria's old notebook. "She wanted you to have this," she said softly. Jonathan sat by her bed, reading her handwriting lessons, sketches, fragments of speeches. One line stood out: "Even when my voice is gone, may it still teach someone to speak kindly." He read her letters aloud for hours, as if his words could pull her back. Students from around the world sent voice messages that Jonathan played beside her ear. A child from Kenya said, "Teacher Maria, I want to be like you." A nurse from Canada whispered, "You taught me to speak softly to patients." He hoped she could hear. After 2 long days, Maria opened her eyes. "You came back," she murmured. "Always," he replied, tears streaming down his face. She smiled weakly. "Then finish the story, Jonathan." "Promise me." "I will," he said. She squeezed his hand. "Then let's rest now." Her eyes closed peacefully. Jonathan stayed by her side all night. At dawn, as sunlight spilled into the room, her heartbeat slowed and then stopped. The world lost a voice, but gained an echo that would never fade. After the New York summit, Maria's life changed faster than she could have imagined. Invitations poured in from London, from Singapore, from universities that wanted to hear her speak about the Filipino rhythm of English. For a woman who had spent most of her life in a classroom by the sea, it was overwhelming. Jonathan stayed by her side, filming everything, quietly protecting her from the noise of sudden fame. But Maria never let the attention distract her from her purpose. She reminded Jonathan that a microphone is not a throne, it's a bridge. Every time she stood before a camera, she thought of her students back home. The ones who still practiced pronunciation under mango trees and whispered new words into the evening breeze. The documentary they were making grew into something neither of them had expected. What started as a short feature became a full-length project titled The Accent of Empathy. It wasn't just about language anymore, it was about the spirit behind it. Jonathan traveled across the islands with Maria, capturing stories of call center workers, radio hosts, and farmers who used English to reach the world. In Cebu, they met a young woman named Leela who taught herself English by watching YouTube videos and later became an online tutor for students in Canada. A child from Kenya said, Teacher Maria, I want to be like you. And nurse from Canada whispered, You taught me to speak softly to patients. He hoped she could hear. After 2 long days, Maria opened her eyes. You came back, she murmured. Always, he replied, tears streaming down his face. She smiled weakly. Then finish the story, Jonathan. Promise me. I will, he said. She squeezed his hand. Then let's rest now.